AFMC is really known.
And also make sure
Hello and welcome into this week's edition of AFMC TV. We're glad you're joining us. I bet you'll be able to think of at least one person as we explore today's topic. Joining me now is Dr. Chad Rodgers, and we are here to talk about an important topic. Well, all the topics we talk about are important, but this one I love. So when we see a young man or young woman, adult male, adult woman, all of a sudden come peeling into the parking lot at work in this brand new fancy red convertible, what's the first thing you think of?
midlife crisis.
That's exactly what I think of. And so we're going to talk about midlife crisis today. First of all, is that really a thing, or do we use that as an excuse?
It really is sort of a thing, so it's not well described. It's sort of something that's very common to our culture, the American culture. Some people say that it's not really a real thing. Is it really a crisis? That's the big debate, because it's a time in your life where things do kind of change and things do kind of turn over, but it's not necessarily a crisis. And it depends on how you handle it. It makes it a crisis or not. But it's actually kind of a normal developmental step in our lifetime. We all live long enough now to get into our 50s. And so sometime in your kind of late 40s, mid 50s, even in your early 60s, many people will go through a period of time where they're just, reflecting on what happened in the past, what the future looks like. You're kind of seeing the end, which is sort of morbid, but it's sort of the reality of life. And then people are kind of doing a lot of introspection and reflection. And then I think it's also kind of a time where you begin to think about, what do I want to do with the last part of my life? So it is a big time of change.
And I would think, too, some of that, as you are reflecting and you see how the past has been and what the future, and then maybe even fear on multiple levels, but including, I didn't save enough.
Right.
Or my 401k is totally tanked, and so it's not always just fancy sports cars, trading in the minivan for the, convertible. There's a lot of emotions.
Right.
And maybe even some mind games.
Right.
That take place.
So it is perfectly normal to feel kind of sometimes discontent. I mean, we've all experienced that at some time in our life. And sometimes maybe it's just your career. Maybe you're not where you thought you would be, or maybe you're not where you thought you would be financially, or maybe you've gotten a divorce and you're starting over. So, sometimes it's kind of that reflection on life and realizing that you're not where you want to be. So the big driver there is anxiety. So, which is a normal response to stress. People get worried about things. It's kind of how you handle it, how you approach it, how you think about it, and then where you're going next. It's going to kind of take you out of that.
So talk a little bit about that mindset shift and kind of how to get through that. Maybe feel the feels and go through the emotions, but then how do you come out of that on a positive note?
Right. Well, so usually some people have had some sort of significant change in life. Maybe they lost a parent, lost a spouse. Sometimes it's the kids leaving for college. But there's a lot of things happening physically too. We're changing, our physical appearance, but also our joints and our muscles, and things ache. And, it's not as easy to run 5 miles and then get up and do it again the next day, because it takes longer for our body to repair. Sleep is really important, and it sometimes becomes disrupted at this age group. So there's a lot of things that you can do. Number one, don't isolate yourself. Relationships are very important. And I think talking about it and sharing about it and kind of normalizing a little bit, because a lot of people are going through it too. I think people feel like they're going through it very alone. But it is something that other people are going through. I think it's good to talk through, maybe talk about some specific things. I think sometimes it's a good time to talk to your doctor or even a psychologist, sort of about what you're going through, so that you can kind of get some skills to kind of help deal with that stress. But I think it's a good time in life to say, hey, it's time to push the reset button. What worked in my 20s and 30s and 40s, it's not going to work in my 50s and 60s and 70s. And so I need to think about how I'm going to sleep different, how I'm going to eat different, how my activity is going to be different, how I'm going to spend money differently. But I think it's also, how am I going to do some self-care so that for the last part of my life that I am good. And we do actually see that people do go through some time where they are unhappy, maybe have some discontentment, maybe even go through a little depressive phase. But most studies show that by your 60s, most people are beginning to feel happier again. And some people kind of relate that is sometimes the most happy part of their life. So it's a real crucial time to sort of address the issues. Don't kind of push them down. Don't go crazy. Don't go buy the sports car, leave your wife, buy a yacht. bad idea.
Right.
Talk to your friends, pull people in, and if you need to, engage a professional.
So 2 final questions.
Yeah.
Does everyone experience this? And how long can this crisis last?
Right. So it doesn't happen to everybody. They say about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people will have a midlife crisis. Okay. And so it's not necessarily something that everybody happens. And again, it's something that happens very commonly in our culture. So it's sort of a time to kind of begin to think about what you've done, what your strengths are, and kind of build on those so that you can kind of move out and kind of begin to do things a little bit differently. And like I said, most people report after this phase and after this time of change that happiness actually does improve. So you are sometimes at a point in your life where you're not as worried about income, which is nice because you've kind of worked and you've saved, if you have saved appropriately, and you can really enjoy time with your children and your grandchildren and with friends. And also it's a time to re-engage your spouse. So children leaving the home is a big deal. It totally changes the dynamic between you and your spouse. Sometimes you have to kind of get to know each other again. But if you're going to ride out the rest of life together, you need to kind of work on that relationship. So those are really important.
And it can last?
Oh, it can last. Most of the time, people start to move out in their mid to late 50s, early 60s.
Okay. So not so bad.
Not so bad.
All right. And hopefully
it can be good.
And not everyone experiences
right.
it. And
I think the thing is it's a normal lifetime developmental milestone step. So don't feel like you're going crazy.
Okay. Dr. Chad, anything else you'd like to add?
That's pretty much it. I think the biggest thing is, make sure you're eating well, you're sleeping well, and exercise is so crucial to overall happiness and just longevity. So having that routine, you don't have to run an intense 5 miles anymore, but you might want to make sure you're walking a good 30 minutes or 20 minutes a day just to keep your health up.
Just being outside and breathing that fresh air makes all the difference. Mm-hmm. Okay. Dr. Chad, thank you so much.
So glad to be here.
And thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here next week for more AFMC TV.